Hey everybody, and welcome to another week of the Management Defect Framework. I'm really excited for today's topic. It's very close to my heart, and that is talking about, is leadership a team sport? Last week we had a little bit of a bumpy session. I think lessons learned for me is pre-record anything that's up north that requires an internet connection. But that's okay too, because this is all a learning experience. And if you're going to fail quickly. So this week we have a really exciting topic. I am thrilled to actually discuss this. It's something, when I saw the quote, I was going through TikTok and I saw this quote, and it immediately just evoked something inside of me that got me excited to talk about it. And the question is leadership a team sport? Now, I'm just going to let that hang in the air and let you all kind of think about what that means and what that pulls from your mind with your experiences. And as we get into it, you'll hear about mine, which I'm really excited to talk about. So we're going to talk about leadership in team sports. We'll talk about what's a management defect. And I know a lot of people have been reaching out and talking to me about it over the last little bit. So thank you. And we'll get into that a little further. And then talk about the management defect framework and how these problems can be solved by using our 9-step framework that we've put together. By putting every problem through that same lens, you'll be able to overcome the problems that we describe here, and as an approach to improve your team overall. So increase productivity, increase team cohesion, increase process optimization and workflow in our 3-pillared approach, which is strategize, optimize, and authorize. Although there's a word that doesn't really exist, I was going to call it authoritize, as in give yourself authority. Let me know in the chat if you think authoritize is a real word or not. I couldn't find it when we looked it up, but I'm going with authorize now because of the spell check. But anyway, as we go through this is when I first heard this quote, I started doing some research on it because it really gives you pause, right? Like, what is leadership, and how, as a leader, can you provide the best support? Can you do your job the best way possible? And I just want to be clear that leadership doesn't mean being the CEO of a company. Leadership is at every single level. And that's the most important thing for you to remember, is that if you're watching this, you're empowered to be a leader for your group and whatever connections you have on your project, on your team, in your family, in your community. That's something that you're empowered to do. So when we talk about leadership, this is a quote from Dr. Joshua Weiss, but when we talk about leadership in terms of an individual, but if you speak to truly effective leaders, they often talk about the key to their success being their team. And this quote I really liked. I'm trying to think about the most polite way to say this, but I always measure people in their responses. When you say, "Oh, you've done a great job," does that person take the credit and be like, "Oh, well, thank you, I've worked hard"? Because I find that the best leaders, the most effective leaders, are the ones who go, "Yes, my team's done a great job. Yeah, I'll let the team know." Because it's never an individual effort. And those people are the ones that are very strong leaders and the ones who are motivating their team to work together. So I found that quote really interesting. And if you think about that question for you, great job. Well, thank you. Do you take the credit or do you give your team the credit? Let me know in the chat. which way it goes, or maybe that's a gut check. Maybe you're maybe you don't want to answer that. Maybe that's just a question for yourself. But how do you lead? Do you take the credit, or do you share it with the team? I know as a program manager and a project manager, sometimes I'm managing hundreds of people. How can I be the one that takes the credit? I know that a lot of the time I'm the accountable one, the one where the fingers point when things go wrong or where they get pointed to if it succeeds. But ultimately, as a PM, you're the conductor of the ship, or you're the captain of a team. Let's keep it with the sports analogies, right? Your job as in that role as a project manager or as a manager of your team is to coach your team to work together. And we'll get into a little more of that as we go. This was the original quote I saw on TikTok. No one is smart enough or strong enough to lead by themselves. No one. That was by Simon Sinek. And I really just loved that comment, because if you think you're the smartest person in the room, that may serve you well in the short term, but it will never serve you well in the long term. You're propped up by the quality people that you work with. And there's been a trend, or there's been a lot of hot topic about quiet quitting, and that's people just doing their job and not giving more than that in extra time. And a lot of time, leaders, it's your job to bring the best out of those people with the time that they're willing to provide or that you compensate them for. And maybe by having stronger team cohesion, you give them a bigger sense of purpose and a bigger sense of identity. Being a contractor for the last over 15 years, I have a very different lens. I'm always focused on delivering for a project, and I find it successful by bringing the team together. But a lot of people are focused in different ways. I've had colleagues of mine in other jobs or under other industries where I said, oh, well, if you're interested, they reach out and go, well, I'm interested in contracting. I'm interested in doing something different, but they're not willing to take that step because they like their boss. They are happy with their lifestyle. And so sometimes it's not about the dollars. It's not about this ulterior motivation, and understanding that you as the leader have the ability to bring that team together and make them feel satisfied in their job, so that when whatever effort they're putting out, it's focused on your priorities, and it gives them meaning and it gives them purpose, more than that they're getting outside of their home. So here's a couple of pieces within this, is that for coaching, how to manage your worst and your best player. And here I'm gonna go back to my hockey days. I've had the pleasure of playing hockey over 35 years, and that was as a player and in the later years as a coach for my son's team. And I've was not an all-star, but when you play that many years, you win a lot of games, you lose a lot of games. You play with a lot of different people and a lot of different personalities. And for me, scoring the winning goal in a playoff game to win the championship was completely surpassed by the feeling of coaching my son's team and having them have these successes. And it wasn't always just about the success of like, oh, we won the game or we won the championship. I remember being on the ice with my son when he played goalie for the first time, and that was the first time their team won a game all season, and he still let in 5 or 6 goals, but the elation of being able to motivate somebody that was absolutely terrified to play this role, and spending some time to coach them both on the ice and mentally on how to use their team and how to communicate to help hide some of their flaws and get better in some of those areas was the most elation that I've had in hockey. And I had the chance to be on the ice as a coach for my son, who was, I believe, 8 years old at the time. But the idea is that you're coaching somebody to bring the best out of them. And that's your job as a leader, and that's your job as a manager. And if you look at it, maybe the example I had was somebody who was, not great at the time in that particular role. But coaching is not just about coaching your worst person. I also spent a lot of time coaching my best players to understand, oh, you're not just a goal scorer. Your job is to pass the puck. The beautiful thing about kids hockey is they have a 3-goal rule. So the All-Stars can't score 20 goals in a game and completely deflate everybody else, which forces them to work on other aspects of their game, like passing and playing two-way hockey, playing offense and defense at the same time. And that analogy works the exact same with your team. You're going to have all-stars. You're going to have people that are at the bottom. And it's your job to get the all-stars to help coach the lower people, as well as having your team work together to complement their strengths and weaknesses. So a couple of little interesting tidbits from a hockey perspective, and I'll probably go on with this in a future discussion, because I have lots of stories about hockey and how teamwork and team sports has absolutely trained me to be a project manager, to lead teams of hundreds, and ideas like that. Using a team to manage upwards. So this one here, this is really interesting. So the thought behind this is that I'm going to use an example from a previous role, but I had a manager, a senior director, that we called it the quiz show. So every week I would go into the office, and the questions could be on any subject matter material, oftentimes items outside of the scope of the project I was running. And within that, I felt like, oh, what don't I know? How do I not know this information? I'm not doing my job. And I realized to be a real effective leader on this project and to support the leadership that I was working with, I needed to bring in the full team, because what he was wanting was not a report from me on one specific project. He wanted to look at everything else that was interrelated. So I brought our dev lead, I brought our QA lead, I brought our BA lead, and had them in it so that when those questions came for that little minute detail that only a developer working on that piece of code, or only a tester who had actually done that particular work or would understand the integrations between those projects, could answer it. And so I went from feeling completely dejected, like I wasn't able to answer these questions, to setting myself up for success with a team to answer anything on the quiz show. It's like, I'll take integration of systems for 500, Alex, no problem. We had our QA director there. I'll take requirements spanning multiple lines of business for 1,000, Alex. Obviously, huge Jeopardy fan. But those are the things that you have to think about. And being a leader is coming up with those situations on how you can leverage your team to provide the right amount of information for your stakeholders and to build the team together. It was a lot less stress and mental health taxation on me once I figured this out. I also found out that the rest of my team was very happy because they were able to centralize all of that reporting into one meeting, and so save them probably 4 hours a week in other management meetings that they would have to have with the same stakeholder to answer the same questions, and then also have the quiz show. So that one was a great one. Another piece that I is an absolute must is when you're hiring, and the key is having a winning team that provides you the full toolkit. I'm going to give an example on a program that I ran recently where we scaled from 6 teams up to 30 teams running concurrently. So we were hiring hundreds of people at a time, which meant no, this wasn't a project with 2 BAs, this was a project with 12 BAs, and how many UX designers and how many BSAs. And when you're just hiring at that volume, the questions start to change. I'm not just looking for a BA that understands the subject matter expertise. I'm trying to understand the full toolkit of my team. So, for example, on the BSAs that I was hiring, one of them had QA automation specialization in their background. So they had previously been an automation tester. For me, I was, a light bulb went off in my head and said, well, I could hire somebody that's been a BA and I have a team of people that have that expertise, but I would much rather take somebody who has a different toolkit that they can apply not just to the one slice that they'd be working on, but also have them review every single document and work with all the other BSAs to add it to their toolkit so that when they're looking at it, the lens that they have also includes that. I hired another one that used to be a developer. I had one that was formerly an architect, one that had worked in UX. So all of a sudden, once you start hiring all these people, you're not just having someone who can perform one job, you're coming with so much more experience that the quality of the output of what you're providing is going to be so much greater. And so that's really something to kind of think about as you look to add people to your team, especially as the new fiscal year is coming and all the new projects are going to be started. There's going to be a lot of recruiting going on, and think about how you can fill that toolkit with different perspectives, different people from different industries, people who have different experiences and lenses. Don't just look for, well, I need a BSA with 10 years experience in this field. Yes, you may get somebody that is going to have the information you want, but you may get even more value by bringing somebody in who isn't from that area and has a completely different lens. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and everyone is going to have a different perspective, but really, they'll all be wrong on this question unless you answer one thing. Who is the greatest leader in sports of all time? And the answer, unquestionably, and this is very controversial, so I apologize if this makes anybody upset, is Wayne Gretzky. Number 99, the great one. There's a reason he's the greatest leader in sports of all time. He has the most goals of all time, but he has double the amount of assists than he has goals. That, for me, when you're looking at somebody who can play on your team, somebody you want on your side, they're always looking to where the puck isn't. They're always looking to where the people are going. They're looking from the forest, from the trees to bring that team together. An assist in hockey means you've had to pass the puck to somebody who then scored. That's the best leader every single time. Who's going to support your team better than somebody who cares more about getting the goal for the team than looking great and scoring the goal themselves? So shout out to number 99, greatest of all time. Now, there was one other, I'm being from Toronto and being a huge Raptors fan, there's another leader that I wanted to talk about, and that was Kyle Lowry. So he was part of the Raptors championship team a few years back, and I was looking at leadership in sports and some articles, and I found one back from 2014 where they talked about Kyle Lowry, where they had said, Kyle is amazing, but his biggest obstacle is himself. He wasn't coachable, and he got to a low point in his career where he had to make a decision. Can I be coachable? Can I turn my career around in a contract year? And he went to Toronto and changed the way that he played. He still played hard and played with grit and was the model for what, you see players like Fred VanVleet doing now. But it was putting your heart, putting 100% into it to strive to get better. And when you work with people like that, in the corporate world, where you see that they're always improving, they're always trying to do whatever they can to make everybody better and doing things at such an expert level, it makes you want to raise yourself up to that standard. So think about that also when you're hiring or when you're looking at the dynamics of your team and the culture that you want to have. And that doesn't mean this is the person that's putting in the most hours, because that is not a metric that we should be measuring anymore. It's who's helping bring your team forward, who's bringing your department forward, who's talking up saying, this process is broken, this is costing hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars and nobody's talking about it, we should fix this. Okay, instead of I'm going to try and fix it. Here's a couple steps I'm going to take. Or why are we having so many meetings? We can do this in one, and here's a framework I've set up. Or let's move all of this to this reporting to a centralized tool, so we only have to do it once, and I save everybody 2 or 3 hours in their week. Once you have people who are championing making these changes for the better of your entire group, you are going to quickly find that other people are going to step back going, oh, well, maybe my voice counts. Maybe this is wrong and I can help improve that as well. So, that's part of the culture and part of the team culture. If you're helping make your team better, everybody is going to be following suit. So let's talk about some actionable insights as we wrap up here. Talked about building a team that fills the gap in your experience or capability. Look at that toolkit. Do you have somebody who's got a different frame of reference, a different experience, a different lens on your team that is going to make your team better? We talked about being as strong as the weakest member of your team and understanding that it's your job as a leader to coach that person and to find the gaps that in their game and improve it, or give them roles where they do excel, because that person may be the weakest in a certain subject, but everybody has a skill. Everybody has something they're brilliant at. And just a little story on this, and this is going back to coaching my son's team. We had someone on the team at the start of the year who was extremely weak. They weren't a strong skater. They weren't a strong scorer. I wouldn't call them exactly a pylon, which is in hockey terms somebody who doesn't really move a lot or very effective, but it was someone who was very timid and didn't know their role on the team. And we spent the entire season encouraging this person. Every time they got on the bench, talking about what they did well, what they needed, areas that they could improve on, having them communicate with their other team members, trying to come up with a plan. And it was this person at the end of the season in our playoff game that scored to tie the game to keep us alive to move into a shootout. And so understanding that everybody saw that person as the weakest member of the team at the start, but identifying that this person was coachable, this person was willing to improve, and taking the time as a manager to actually, and a coach, to improve their game paid off for us in the end. And again, playing for 35 years, there's been lots of wins, there's been lots of losses, lots of championships, but these small moments make me the proudest, for sure, of all of my time in hockey. And then the other piece, coaching is not only meant for raising the bottom. So when you're looking at your team, don't just look at that person who needs the most coaching to get them to where you need. How can you leverage your all-stars on the team to help coach? How can you leverage your all-stars to help you solve problems in other areas that you're happening? That's still active coaching that needs to happen as a manager. So that's also something to think about as we're going along. So just wanted to take a second to pause and say thank you. I've received so much feedback from so many of you, and thank you for sharing these topics. Naveen, Hardeep, Sudhakar, Aditya, Nindya, Sheetal, Faye, Seb, Deborah, Aaron. There's been so many people. This is just a few who have actually given me topics, but I really appreciate this. This right now for me is a labor of love. I've really enjoyed kind of sharing some of these views with you and hearing back from everybody and seeing how this is helping people reframe the job that they're doing. And if I can help make the work easier and make everybody's job a little bit easier, that for me gives me the most pleasure. That's why we say, get more from the team you have and spend less time doing it. That's not just a catchphrase. That's what I'm trying to accomplish, because I think, at the end of the day, we're all here working, and how do you make the best of the time, and how do you make it most efficient, and how do you grow the business and get the most out of it? And so these were just a few of the topics, and I will be talking about these as we move along over the next few weeks. So just as we're wrapping up, I want to take you through what's a management defect. I get asked a whole bunch, and I'm sure if you're following along or listening to this, a management defect is a preventable flaw in the management and oversight of teams and projects. And solving these problems is exactly what the 9-step management defect framework I've set up is all about. And I've changed it just a little bit. So we formerly was strategize, digitize, optimize, but really based on the conversations and amazing feedback I've had from a lot of people, it's now about strategizing, understanding the problems that you're having and setting your team up for success to monitor them and tackle them, optimizing it, so how we can get more from the team we have and spend less time doing it, how we can communicate and move some of this work, digitize it, but also move it into centralized tools so we can visualize it, and then put your team in a position of authority, and how you can help your team put work on autopilot, put these big problems on autopilot, and especially put these little problems on autopilot so you can spend your time on critical issues and not these avoidable non-critical issues that we've been having. So in terms of the MDF challenge and the think tank, we're going to be running a pilot in September. It's going to be a limited group audience that we're going to be taking in. The idea behind it is I could have done just here, let me do a webinar, let me just do a quick course, and you go through it and go, oh, there's one aha moment. I'm more concerned about hands-on changes. So the idea is I coach you in a group through the management framework to solve these issues that surround our pillars, right? So things like asynchronous communication and cross-team collaboration, how to fix your broken processes, or how to solve team retention, and understanding that every time you lose a resource, it costs 1.5 times the cost of that resource to replace them. And there's a lot of hidden costs on your teams that haven't been visualized, haven't been reported on, so you don't have leadership buy-in to solve those problems and help save your department budgets in the long term. So the idea is it's a 90-day workshop that we will go through. And over those 90 days, we'll tackle 9 challenges. We'll teach you how to implement the framework. We'll teach you how to create a management defect scoring model to understand and put dollars and data behind all your work. Create a personalized framework for you, because yes, there's 9 steps, but each person is going to execute it a little bit differently. And once you've been able to run yourself through these nine challenges, you'll be able to go and take that and apply it to anything else that you're doing. And from there, it'll authorize you and put yourself in a bigger position of authority to recession-proof your career, to get that next promotion, or as a contractor to ask for a higher rate next time, because you're working on senior top-level issues that impact your entire department, not just one narrow-focused project or one narrow-focused item. So the coaching will be done in groups up to 10. The reason that I've tried to cap it in small groups is that we don't want to have wallflowers. The idea is that if you're coming in here, you want to be an active participant, and the team, everybody who's in there, wants to help swarm challenges and solve challenges with other project professionals and other managers to resolve this. And so this could be, in larger groups, bringing in a full leadership team so that top down, everybody is thinking and reporting the same way. It could be looking at a PMO team and saying, we want everyone to be operating and thinking on a higher level to help solve these cross-department issues. It could be department directors, right? Like this isn't just about projects. This is about how every team and every manager operates. Or it could be bringing in a whole team. I've worked with teams of 5 or 10, specifically guiding them through the framework so that they can work cohesively and they can just optimize the work running in their departments. So this is all about putting your team in a position of authority. And you could look at this framework and you could do it yourself. There's a lot of guesswork. There'll be a lot of hard work, or you could just work through my framework. Thanks a lot, everybody. I'm Harris Krofchick, and we'll see you next week.